All right, hi everybody, John Meadows here, and today we're going to talk about protein, specifically 7 of my favorite food sources of protein. But before I get to that, I got more comments on my last video, the 7 sources of carbohydrates, than about any video I've ever done. And apparently you all loved yo-yo tricks. So Alexander, come on back.
Okay.
What are we doing today for your yo-yo trick?
An Eli hop.
An Eli hop. Okay, let's show everybody what an Eli hop is.
Like that.
All right. Good job, Alexander.
Thank you.
There you go, Eli hops. So today we're going to talk about protein. Protein's obviously very, very important. It helps you build muscle. It helps repair muscle. It's incorporated into cell membranes. That's kind of the outer layer on muscle cells. It helps signals go in and out. It helps make neurotransmitters. It helps make hormones, things like adrenaline. So it's very, very important. So I have 7 picked out I want to go through. And the first one I want to talk about is salmon, specifically wild-caught salmon. It's long been one of my favorite sources of protein because of all the other additional benefits it has. And if you remember, I did a video a while back talking about how not to just look at macronutrient numbers, carbs, proteins, fats, etc. Look at the other benefits to the food. What other nutrients are in the food? And salmon is an awesome source of omega-3s. Now, I prefer to get wild salmon. Farm salmon, I'm not so big on. If you've ever seen the process of how they put them in pens and what they feed them, it's far from their natural diet. The salmon, they're carnivores. Normally they eat krill, and they'll even eat mackerel and other things. But normally they eat krill. That's where they get their orange color from. It's from a carotenoid called astaxanthin. Gives them that nice orange flavor. Whereas the farm salmon actually has this kind of this gray flavor, or not flavor, color. And there's a thing called a samophan. I remember reading about this years ago. So the salmon farmers will go and they'll pick out, it's almost like you're going to Home Depot and picking out a color of orange. And they just inject the dye into the salmon to make it look pretty. But I'm just not a big fan of farm salmon, so I prefer to eat wild salmon at least a couple times a week at least. But that would be my protein number 1. One other additional thing I want to add about the salmon is it's not cheap. So you could sub in other oily fishes. You could put in sardines. Sardines actually was one of the foods I used to use when I was in college. When I got out of college, I didn't have a lot of money. If you do that, make sure you get it packed in olive oil or mustard sauce. Don't get it packed in the cheap vegetable oil. You could also use mackerel. Mackerel is a very underrated fish, actually. And there's all different kinds of mackerel, but very, very high in omega-3s also. There's anchovies. I don't particularly like those. It tastes like I'm eating a salt block. But mackerel is another good alternative, and sardines if you're trying to save a little money. So I always like to tell people that because I know wild salmon is not cheap. Number 2 on my list is grass-fed beef. I prefer to get my beef from a farmer. Years ago, I went to a website called eatwild.com. It's been a long time since I've been on that website. I don't even know if it's still up. But they had, by state, listings of various farmers that sold, eggs and meats and everything. And I found a farmer that was pretty close to me that had red Angus meat. And I went out and visited him. His name was Tom Maxwell. He's an awesome guy. And you could see how he cared about the cows, how he took care of them. And that's how I prefer to buy my red meats. So I like to get them from somebody where I know the cows have been treated well. I'm a big animal guy, obviously. And, the grass-fed beef, like nutritionally, is a little different than the regular beef. I'm not so concerned about that. There is a better omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. You do get a little more CLA. You do get better nutrients from the grass-fed beef, but it's not a big difference. It's not a massive difference. I tend to get the grass-fed beef just because I know the animals are treated better. It's more of I'd rather purchase from somebody who's treated the animals well, as opposed to somebody who's put them in pens and fed them bad food and pumped them full of antibiotics because they're sick all the time. So grass-fed beef, also a great source of hemi-iron. Hemi-iron is it's a source of iron that you get from animals. It's very absorbable from your body as opposed to plant versions of iron. It's got a lot of B12, a lot of zinc, so a lot of really good nutrients with grass-fed beef as well. I personally like the taste of it. Sometimes when I eat the regular beef, it's kind of like greasy. I get like a greasy taste from it. But so grass-fed beef, number 2, something I'm a big fan of. All right, protein source number 3 is wild game. I love wild game, buffalo, venison, elk. It's like grass-fed beef. You get B12, iron, zinc, all that good stuff, all kinds of nutrients. But depending on where you live, you may or may not have access to a lot of the different game meat out there. But here we have a lot of deer, and it's an awesome meat. It has a real nice flavor to it. Buffalo is very common around here. So game meat would be number 3. I even used to prepare for my shows actually with ostrich meat. I don't know if I'd call that game meat or not, but we had a specialty store here in Clintonville, a little town where we actually went there and bought camel meat. If you remember my camel hamburger video, I used to go there and I used to get ostrich steaks. They had fillets, and I actually used to eat those back in 2000, 2001 when I was in a Mr. USA contest. So that's protein source number 3. All right, number 4 is organic eggs. I prefer that you get the eggs from a farmer where you can see the chickens running around. The yolks are typically much more nutritious. Sometimes they even feed the chickens various things that'll make their omega-3 content go up. That's a good thing as well. But normally when you get eggs that are from a farm, you can see the difference in the yolk. The yolks are more orange from all the carotenes that are in it, as opposed to, and they're real firm. You can put a yolk in your hand and actually it'll just sit there. Whereas the cheaper yolks that you'll get for the eggs that are 99 cents a dozen, the yolks are really almost see-through, and you put the yolk in your hand, it'll just basically disintegrate. So when you see the yolks that are real firm and they have that orange yellowish texture, I look at that as a much more nutritious yolk. It actually tastes a lot better too. The other thing I wanted to mention was a lot of people do develop sensitivities to eggs when they eat them over and over and over. One way to combat that is to change the way you're cooking them, kind of rotate it. That actually changes the way the proteins fold in the egg. The amino acid sequences, the DNA, all that kind of stuff is a little different. I like eggs over easy where the yolk isn't heated up too much. You can actually oxidize the cholesterol in the yolk when you scramble it, although I do eat scrambled eggs. But I would kind of rotate how you do it. Don't eat them raw all the time. Don't eat them scrambled every time. Over easy, would be probably my number 1 choice. But just rotate the way you cook them so you don't develop sensitivity to it. I've dealt with so many people over the years that develop sensitivities to eggs. They'll eat them, they'll get real bloated. And usually it's the people that are drinking them. They're not cooking them. And when you cook your eggs, they're actually more bioavailable. You actually get more protein from cooking them as opposed to drinking them. There's several studies out there that have proven that many years ago. So that would be protein choice number 4. I love eggs. All right, number 5 on my list, lean white fishes. I like cod myself. A lot of them I don't really like the flavor, but cod I really like. Now, cod is just almost straight protein. There's not a lot of fat in it. There is a lot of nutrients in it, but it's almost just straight protein. And the other thing I like about cod is when you're dieting and you're trying to restrict calories, it's very low in calories because again, all it is protein. There's very little fat in it. There's no carbs in it. Cod tends to flavor better, I think, than a lot of the other fishes, the lean white fishes. But I like cod, and I think there's a reason why it's probably the number 1 fish among bodybuilders. Probably that or canned tuna, depending on how much money you have. It seems like you start at canned tuna, and then you graduate to cod. And then if you're doing really well, you start putting in a little bit of wild-caught salmon. But anyways, so big believer in cod. It's a great fish. Eat up. Number 6, free-range poultry like chicken and turkey. Now, it could be white meat. It could be dark meat. So white meat, I always found this pretty interesting. So like the white meat would be a chicken breast and actually a wing. But those muscles are made more for like explosive bursts, like flapping your wings. Whereas their thighs are made more for walking. So what happens is the protein is a little different. There's something called myoglobin. If you look it up, it holds more iron and it's needed for more sustained activity. So that's actually why the meat is darker, like in the legs. It's because it has more iron content and that myoglobin. But if you look that up, it's very fascinating. It's not the actual fat, it's actually the protein and the myoglobin content. In terms of the difference nutritionally, very little difference. There's a little more fat in the dark meat, but the fat's mostly monounsaturated, which, as you all know, it's a heart healthy fat. It's good for you. So whether you're going with a leaner breast or a fattier thigh, either one are good choices. They both have a lot of B vitamins in it, nice, and all that good stuff, hemi-iron, like we talked about with the beef. Again, though, I like to get animals that are free range if possible. I know that's not always possible, but if you can, go for it. So that would be number 6. All right, number 7 would be mollusks. It's hard to say. That's like clams, scallops, oysters, mussels. I mean, you can't go wrong with something called mussels, right? Oysters, for example, though, loaded with zinc. That's what they're kind of known for. They also have a ton of tyrosine in them, which converts to dopamine in your brain. So it's good for like mental clarity, making you feel sharp. And then like the clams and some of those other food, mussels, they have tons of B12, tons of minerals, a good amount of selenium. I actually like the way they taste. I actually like to eat them in combinations all at once. Some people like them, some people don't. But I actually really like them. I would tend to go to a restaurant to eat those so that I know it's prepared, so that I know that it's prepared correctly. I'm not sure that I would trust myself to make those. And I wouldn't just go buy it in a store out of a can and, I wouldn't do that. I'd rather have somebody prepare it that's good at it. So anyways, that's number 7. Those are awesome as well. I hope you enjoyed these sources of protein. Obviously, there's other proteins that we like as well. These are the 7 that just kind of jumped out at me. And I hope you enjoyed Alexander's yo-yo trick, the Eli hops. And we'll see you next time. All right, we got one more for you, a bonus one. Maybe you're looking for a plant protein. If you watch my other videos, you've seen me talk about lentils. I'm a big fan of lentils. I probably talked about them before for their source of fiber. A cup has, 14, 15, 16 grams of fiber. It has a lot. And it also has something like 16 grams, depending on the type of lentil, protein too in a cup. So it's a great vegan protein. I like the red ones myself. The red ones, I just like the texture of them. I like how they taste in soups. And I like to actually, this doesn't really work for vegans, but I like to pour it on top of the chicken and eat it. But you can just eat the soup. Like the browner and the greener colored lentils I like in salads, but the red ones are the ones I like to get cooked and eat as a soup. So lentils, great source of fiber, great source of protein. So for you vegans out there, I think that's a good choice for you.